Darkcast Network. Welcome to the dark side of podcasts.
Content warning ahead. This podcast contains very sensitive topics such as missing persons, unsolved cases, haunted houses, and paranormal activity. These type of topics can contain very upsetting, sensitive details and stories. Please listen responsibly. Welcome to Misty Mysteries, a podcast in the business of ghostly spooks and chilling crimes. I'm your host, Keely, and today it's going to be kind of a short but spooky episode. Now, without giving away my own location, I actually picked a haunted place pretty close to me. This haunted location I found out about through a content creator on TikTok by the username Holly Weird Paranormal. She's a paranormal investigator here in California, and specifically she talks a ton about haunted locations around Los Angeles. I love her content because those are spooky places close to me. Today's haunted location is the Pasadena Playhouse. For those of you who haven't heard of the Pasadena Playhouse before, let's get into the history of it and its hauntings. As many of us know, Hollywood plays a large part in the entertainment industry, and for the history of this location, we are going back in time to 1917. To set a scene of this point in time in the United States, Woodrow Wilson was president and elected for a second term. The women's suffrage movement was going strong, leading to the first Navy female petty officer, the first woman in Congress, and New York passing laws for women's right to vote. 8-hour workday laws started to pass in the Supreme Court. 10 million men were drafted as the U.S. entered World War I, and the Prohibition had just started. Walt Disney had just graduated high school, so California was not yet home to Disneyland, and the world hadn't even heard of Mickey Mouse. At this time, stars like Dean Martin, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Ella Fitzgerald, Buddy Rich, and even JFK were born. Someone who was already born, though, way before 1917, and plays a very important part in the Pasadena Playhouse, was a man named Gilmor Brown. In 1916, during the Little Theater movement, a movement to help support live theater and art in the time that large Broadway productions were on the rise, Gilmor Brown began to produce a series of plays with his theater group in an old burlesque theater. In 1917, Gilmor established the Pasadena Playhouse Association for the community of Pasadena. With the association, he was able to create such an audience and supportive community that he was able to collect donations from 1,000 citizens of Pasadena, and he used this to purchase a piece of land. This land became the home of the Pasadena Playhouse Association when a Spanish colonial-style building designed by architect Elmer Gray was finished in 1925. Very quickly, this building helped draw in such an audience for small theater that Pasadena began to be called the Athens of the West. Because with the amount of passion and support Athens showed art of theater, so did Pasadena, California. The Pasadena Playhouse was a world-renowned destination at only 2 years in, so of course it became the School for Theater Arts. It first established the theater arts program through the University of California in 1927, but became accredited on its own in 1936, only a year before it became the official theater of California. As a college and working theater, it took up almost a full square block, featuring 5 theaters, the main stage of this having 300 plus performances alone each year. It had a scene shop and a section for the college that featured old homes turned into dorms for students. It even became one of the first TV stations in California and taught the first set of techs to work in television. They also taught the Air Force how to use TV and radio technology. But as successful as the theater and the college was, during the 1960s it fell into hard times. On January 12, 1960, Gilmor Brown passed away at 74 years old in Palm Springs, California. The Pasadena Playhouse struggled to get a solid leadership after this, and with the changes in the entertainment industry by the Actors Equality Association to obviously better the working conditions for actors, and the number of universities that now offered theater arts, the doors of the Pasadena Playhouse closed in 1969 after the theater went bankrupt. for 6 years, this building sat empty until the city bought it in 1975 and sold it to a real estate developer, who then let it sit empty for another 17 years before he reopened the doors in 1986, bringing it back as a community theater. Since then, despite some struggles here and there with money and changes in personnel, the theater has thrived. It's remained such an important part of California's history and the entertainment industry, with alumni such as Al Pacino, Angelina Bassett, Dustin Hoffman, John Ritter, and George Reeves, who I talked about in the Celebrities Who Haunt episode. I am more than sure there is a lot of history I have even yet to touch the surface on, but as a paranormal podcast, I think we should jump right into the spooks of this place.
Welcome to Murder
and Mimosas.
I'm Shannon.
And I'm Danica.
Together as a mother and daughter duo, we host Murder Mimosas, true crime podcast with an episode released every Saturday at 10 a.m. so you can listen to it during prime brunch time. While we don't require a mimosa, we do highly recommend one. All of our episodes are cases that we found really interesting or just really stuck with us because we hope they'll do the same for you. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
The Pasadena Playhouse ghost is none other than Gilmor Brown. Since his death in 1960, he has been haunting the Playhouse, an office building near it. In his life, Gilmor was very active in the Playhouse, and this carried over into his afterlife. The archivist for the Playhouse, Ellen Bailey, was quoted saying, "He is a helpful, friendly ghost. When he was alive, he wanted things a certain way, and he still does." Gilmor's hauntings are never sinister, like some of the ghosts I've covered before, but that doesn't mean he can't be spooky, especially for those who don't know who he is. Gilmor is seen throughout the Playhouse. He is heard stomping and walking around. He likes to move items around, especially props and different items of the sets. When plays are running, the lighting technicians will take breaks during intermissions, making sure to lock the booths behind them, only to return from break to all of the settings on the lights being changed in the locked lighting booth. Then, for the spookiest haunting of Gilmor, he likes to take rides in an elevator. Gilmor's office while he was alive was on the 3rd floor of a building that is now used as office spaces for a different company, but up until very recently was used by the Playhouse. When employees of the Playhouse rode in this elevator, Gilmor was believed to be right there with them. Even if no one had pushed the button for the 3rd floor where his office was, the elevator would stop there and the doors would open and close, like Gilmor was getting out of the elevator to his office. Some have even reported hearing someone say, "Hello," from the empty 3rd floor. It honestly makes me wonder if he still haunts there, but now it's just a set of people who aren't familiar with Gilmor, or maybe even the history of the Playhouse, which I think would make this even more spooky for them, just having someone not there get off the elevator with no idea who this ghost was and why they're there. I do have a bonus ghost story. It's not related to the Playhouse, but speaking of elevators, I feel like I needed to tell you about my own haunted elevator experience. So a few years ago, I was going to college and my campus was just one building. It had one elevator on it, which is honestly pretty iffy itself. Safety-wise, when I went there, a group of students got stuck in it. But we had to bring heavy rolling backpacks, and I did not want to carry my backpack up and down the stairs every day. One day, I was leaving my class later than everyone else, so I was pretty surprised when I saw 2 other students in the elevator, but I noticed that no one in the elevator had pushed any of the buttons. I turned to the student who was behind me and I asked her if she was going down, but she never answered me, which I thought maybe she just didn't hear me or maybe she was having a bad day. Then I look over to the student on the other side of the elevator, who at that point was just like looking at me like I was being weird. I tried to avoid the odd energy and vibe of this elevator ride, and I wanted to just get out of the elevator. But it was very obvious to me the girl on the side did too, because she ran out of the elevator before I could even get out. This is when I noticed the other student who was behind me never got out, but the elevator was still open and she wasn't there. In the moment, I honestly didn't know what to think of it, and I didn't have time since I had to go to work. But when I thought back to it after work that night, I was like, I know the girl on the side was real because when she ran out of the elevator, she was greeted by her friends. But I swear I never saw another student get out of that elevator. And honestly, until writing out this experience while I wrote this script, I thought the other girl probably just saw me talking to myself. But what if she saw the student who was behind me too and saw her disappear since she was at the right angle to see that happen? That school had a lot of interesting energy, so much so that it was just agreed on by most students the school is haunted. But ultimately we're not here to talk about my haunted school. So let's talk about a few of my favorite paranormal experiences people have had with Gilmor since this haunting started in the 60s. I'll start with one of my favorites. We can obviously tell that Gilmor loved the theater and he was very much a perfectionist. While he was alive, he would often keep actors past rehearsal time working on plays he was directing. He would sit in the audience watching with his cat, and if his cat turned his back to the stage, then Gilmor knew more work needed to be done on the scene. Obviously, Gilmor and his beloved cat have moved on from their lives, but he still seems to be there during dress rehearsals, trying to share his opinion. Once during a dress rehearsal, an overhead light crashed onto the stage. The director of the play at that time knew it was Gilmor and made sure to tell him she would fix that scene. Another experience in the late 1980s, a graduate student was carrying a heavy set piece down the hall when he felt someone on the other side lift it up and help carry it. The student was terrified at first, knowing stories of Gilmor's ghost, but after thinking about Gilmor, he knew he was just trying to help, and he went back to work knowing Gilmor was going to be there to help him if he truly needed it. So many encounters at this playhouse just go to show really that he loved this place and that he is still there in the afterlife. So many encounters at this playhouse just go to show how much Gilmor loved his work and what he built in his lifetime and just how much he wants to be there in his afterlife. With the Pasadena Playhouse recently being reopened again, putting on paranormal tours in October, and its normal plays during the whole year, it makes me wonder how many new encounters we will have with Gilmor and how many encounters will happen even after all of us are gone. If you've had an encounter at the Pasadena Playhouse, I would love to hear about it. I would also like to hear from you if you like this podcast by leaving a good review where you are listening right now, or by heading over to social media, letting me know there. For now, this is the end of the Pasadena Playhouse and Miss Mystery's coverage on it, and I will see you next week for more ghostly spooks and chilling crime.